Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to a segment that we're calling Community Matters. And our special guests today are from the Medicine Hat Community Development part of City, right? This is cool. And we have with us Ashley Howes and Shantel Ottenbreit. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Yeah, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
So good. Happy to be here to talk about Box City.
Absolutely. So Box City is a really unique and interesting project. I'm just learning about it along with all of you today. But what Box City has to offer is literally, I could have a whole sheet on everything that these ladies are seeing the children in our city and their families sort of benefit from this. But what I understand is that this all began after the flood, so 2014. Right?
That's right.
Take us back. How did this little project begin for you guys?
Well, so as community resource workers, we used to work in the schools quite often.
Right.
And so, being in the schools means we're at the ground level seeing kids. And after the flood, particularly in the Elm Street area, so Box City started with Elm Street School,
Okay.
we noticed that they really just needed a way to work through some of the trauma that they were dealing with. After a lot of them lost homes or had damage to their homes, they were misplaced. And so the Box City was sort of created out of that first need. And then once we realized that it was such a special project, Shantel and I got together and we started to sort of talk about how to make it bigger and the learning that could happen from there. And that's really, I guess, how Box City was born.
All right. So Shantel, Box City. Are we creating a new community? Like, what are you asking the kids to do? What's the first thought when you walk in the door? What are you encouraging them to do?
Right. So the end goal is always that we come up with a community that's made up of boxes that are a series of builds, but it's really all the process that we do before then that we get to that makes it so impactful.
Okay.
So we start by going into the classrooms and we talk with the students about a lot of the different things that are important in how community forms, who's included in community, what we need to think about as our communities develop, and how they can play an active role in that. And so we take them through a series of PowerPoints, but then we also have lots of discussion with them. And then ultimately they get assigned a build, which means they're assigned whether it's a single family home or a mixed use space, which we talk about. So we look at the building and planning maps and we talk to them about the different types of zoning and how things are designated and what that means, so that they have some understanding around, we don't just throw buildings together and say, oh, it's a community. It's really purposefully done, and we think about things so that we can think about, do we put an airport next to single family homes? No, that would make it really difficult to sleep at night or things. So we talk about safety and the way that things are put together. We also talk a lot about different elements, things like, how do we get around in a city? What are the modes of transportation we need to consider? Who belongs in our city? How do we make sure that there's places for everybody to feel like they belong and can have a place to gather and meet and those sort of things? And then we talk about things like accessibility and inclusion. How do we make sure that buildings are accessible for people, sidewalks, parks, and providing those sort of things. So when you go and see the city, you'll see that there's some of those elements also included, because the students have been very mindful about providing parking spots for people who have, a different need for different accessibility pieces and things. And there's some buildings with elevators in them so that others can get around. So we talk a lot about different pieces that kind of go into building a community. And then the ultimate pieces that we get to where they actually create their builds out of boxes and other recycled materials. And it's really then that culmination of all those boxes being put together that creates our Box City.
Okay. So I understand from chatting with you to start that this is a third grade project. Now, who's shocked by that? All of that we were learning about city planning, you almost think that this is going to be older kids, right? But you're actually bringing it right down to that young child who's being encouraged to think about what is it to live in a community? What is it to be part of this community? And you're empowering them to think about how can we maybe create a better community, right?
Yeah.
So what else do these kids learn, and when do you go into the school with this? Like, I'm just thinking, what's the timeline with this?
So we sort of have it down to a bit of a science now, having done it for a little while. So for the most part, we go in about a month or 2 months just before they will actually start their build. So we run pre-sessions, we kind of call them, where they do exactly what Shantel had said. They'll, get their building, they'll get their building permit. A lot of the time they'll do a community walk in the area where even their school is, so they can learn about those buildings, those multi-use spaces and family dwellings, and what those actually look like. During those walks too, they're encouraged to look around them. It's really, really strange, because even for myself, if I didn't teach this, I don't always think about going out into the street and looking at street signs or looking where bus stops are or any of those things, but we do encourage them to do that, and then we have discussions with them after. And then to continue that learning, we do talk about, like Shantel said, accessibility and inclusion, making sure we have spaces and places for everyone. Ultimately, just really trying to get them to understand that they do have a voice, even at grade 3 level. They have that voice, and we want them to carry that into the future. Our hope is always that we take 1 or 2 kids from that, and maybe we'll see them on council someday, or being those movers and shakers in our community.
Well, I was just thinking, I was driving down to Viner Center, and there was a proposal, proposed use, right? Now I can see a whole bunch of 3rd graders for the first time ever thinking, what do they think they're going to do with that building? Right? Because a lot of us just drive past those signs and don't even think about it, but you're creating that awareness. I love what you just sort of alluded to. They have to actually put a building permit in place. You don't just get to build that house. There's a process. And so you're actually teaching them and creating that awareness for those things. Okay.
And they actually, so what we do with them is we give them the building permit and we walk through the steps. And so we say, you have to describe things. You have to draw it on the back. And what you draw is what you're going to have to build, because that's what's approved. And so we let them know about the process, and then we get to do a city hall tour. So they come down to city hall, and as part of that tour, they hand in their permits. And our planning and building department is so great, and they actually go through and approve them all. And then the students get them back. And that's always that nerve-wracking feeling for the students, because they're like, okay, are we going to get approved, or are we going to, have to do something? And so it's really a kind of a way of actually taking them through that simulation of what is it like if you're a developer? What is it like if you're putting in this building permit, and what do you need to have, and those sort of things. And then as part of the city hall tour, we also have some fun, and we get to sit in the council chambers, excuse me, and they get to do some voting, and we also talk about process and things like that, so they understand what the process is, and that they're able to come and be in the gallery for any of the city council meetings, that it's open to public, what the role of public is, how you can have a say, and if you didn't agree with something, what are your options? Because what we know is that at grade 3, yes, they're very young, but they're also paying a lot of attention to things at home, to conversations that are happening, to things going on around them. And when we kind of help them to understand some of those pieces and connect the dots, they become much more active citizens, and they feel engaged in the process and in what's going on in their community. And I think, like Ashley said, that's our hope, is that they'll stay engaged. They'll want to stay in our community. They'll want to take active roles in improving our communities in some way, whether it's through volunteerism or becoming a counselor or even a mayor someday, or just even being active, in improving their own neighborhood through a neighborhood association or something. So yeah, we talk about a lot of things, and we think that grade 3 is a really great age because they're so open to so much, and they're really honest as well. And so sometimes we get some feedback that's very helpful. And so we try and take that back and also incorporate it into the work that we do if they have some feedback for us. So
Sure, I love that. We're talking a little bit about having to show them sort of how community works, and that there is a process in place. I loved something we talked about before we came on camera, and Shantel was saying that they were talking about the fact that they thought they should support this idea that they might resurrect a water slide, a riverside water slide. And so they brought this to the children, but helped them to understand that now we're going to vote on this. So we need to talk about the pros and the cons. And you were quite shocked. Tell us a little bit about that process, because it's great.
So when the kids have a chance to sit in the council seats, it's also a really great way to be able to say, hey, now you're going to have a chance to play the role of a counselor, and we're going to put forward a vote to you that you're going to have to vote yes or no to. There's always two sides to it, and I try and choose something that I think would be applicable for them or they would feel some investment in. So we did one this time on the Riverside water slides, and I said, okay, we have a proposal before you. There's a developer who wants to bring this back. We're going to operate it as the city. So on one hand, if you vote yes, we'll get the water slides. But we're going to have to increase taxes. And it was so surprising because they unanimously voted not to bring it back because they said, oh no, we already paid too much taxes. Oh no, it's very expensive already and we don't want our taxes to go up. So what we realized was there's lots of conversations happening around, the household, and they're having these discussions and hearing them. And so it's important to them. And they're realizing that for every decision that's made, there's also an opposite side. We talk about also, skateboarding, and we talk about adding more paths to the city and things that are actual things that are discussions in our community that are happening. So do we extend the trail system? On one hand, it's really important because it helps to connect our community. People love to get out and use our trail system. But on the other, there is some additional expenses, again, to creating those paths and to maintaining them. So for everything, there's a trade-off. And so I think it's really interesting to see how they choose to vote and how they weigh those consequences and choices, I guess. And they're very thoughtful in their vote, which is interesting.
In the end of this specific example, they were very sacrificial. Because that excitement of having a water slide all of a sudden came back to the reality that this is maybe not the time to even consider doing that, right? Yeah. So I think that is really, really cool. So is this a yearly project?
Yes, it is. So it is a yearly project. We bring it back every year. Shantel and I have had a couple moments where we've stepped back and sort of said, maybe we won't do it, but we honestly love the program so much we can't retire it. So now we just modify it every year. So we add in something new.
Okay.
There'll be a different focus each year, or there'll be something else. So last year we tied it to the Rise Up Hot Air Balloon Festival. And so the kids created hot air balloons. And so every year we just sort of create something else. And luckily our partners with River Heights and Dr. Ken Sauer this year have just been, they say yes. Anytime we say something, they're like, yes, absolutely, we'll make it happen. So
that's part of what I think is really kind of fun to understand is that it's different schools and you're rotating through the elementary schools in the city, obviously. And now this is actually being displayed today at the Esplanade. So when did the actual presentation sort of open? What was your date of opening this year's Box City display?
So we opened last week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was around April 18th.
April 18th, yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. And so the box build will stay up for a month. Right now, if you go to the Esplanade, you can look in the galleries, you'll see Box City. And then you can also go through school art as well. So that's the really nice tie-in.
Oh, nice.
Once they're finished with Box City, it always becomes what we call a standing art exhibit for a little while. And it really does look like an art piece. So that's kind of the more exciting part about it. When we first started Box City, it would be up for a couple of days in different locations. And then now that, so many people have bought into it and they really love it, it now is up for like that entire month, which is so cool.
I love that. And by making it into really an art display, but also a collaborative work, like I hope our viewers are really going to be able to appreciate when you go and see this, that little group or that individual who was creating a home was working independently at home with his family on the house that he had to build to spec. And here's this group that are working on a multi-family in, whether it's an apartment or whatever, and understanding the collaboration that's coming together as they put this, that's a big piece.
It is. It is a really, really big piece. You're right, because both schools work independently for as much as they can to create these box builds. So some of the kids will have partners, and some of our bigger builds like the City Bank or City Hall will have maybe a partnership that they're working on. But they don't get to actually see the unveiling of the city either until the actual reception night. So this city is built by these kids. Shantel and I just take it and we kind of place things where, we think they should be at this point when we do the reception. But these kids build every aspect of that box build is theirs.
I just love that. And how's the turnout? So you have, a lot of times we think, well, the school community is the safe place. Are you going to even have families and stakeholders showing up to the reception? How's that turned out for you so far?
We kind of thought the same, but we're surprised every year when it comes to the reception. And this year was our largest yet, which we had 486 people come out. And we, what we do is we just give the invitations to the students in the schools, and we let them know to invite whoever they'd like to invite. So if that's like parents or grandparents or aunts, uncles, neighbors, family, friends. And so these kiddos show up and they have this whole little entourage with them, and they get to really shine that evening. And it's just so much fun to see who shows up for them and who is able to come out for the evening and be part of that special event. So I think it's just such a fun event. We love doing it. And it really is the culmination of so much work from these kids that they just get to then put it on display for those people who are special in their lives.
Well, I think that's just absolutely so cool. Now, one of the things that we were just discussing is that this has also taken on a little bit of a life as a charitable fundraiser, which was not something you guys thought was going to happen. No. But some of the schools, whether it's a few years ago or whatever, decided, hey, we're coming together. Why don't we do this? So tell us a little bit about how the fundraising happened this year.
Yeah, you bet. So Box City is not just kind of an arbitrary project. It is tied to the grade 3 curriculum. And in the grade 3 curriculum, they do learn the rights of a child. And part of that is learning about agencies that will help them and the things that there are in their community. And I guess, honestly, what rights a child has, which a lot of people don't know, but the grade 3s do learn that.
Right.
And so every year they do choose a different charitable organization to donate to. This year they chose the Ronald McDonald House. They got together actually as a group, and they all decided, they voted on it, and they said, yeah, we want to do this. And so they ended up raising $1,100 for the Ronald McDonald House charities this year. So just an incredible thing. And again, Shantel and I, we can't take credit for that. That is actually absolutely all on them. So it's beautiful. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to see them doing and giving back to the community. They take it and they also learn about these charities as well.
Sure.
So, and that learning, I think, really hits deep when you find out that that's something in your community or there's people struggling in a different way. I think it really, for even that, those grade 3s, it really opens their eyes and they go, wow. And then you see them wanting to continue doing that and continue helping. And that's all we could ask for.
That is so cool. I know I was visiting family in the hospital, and that's when I discovered where the Ronald McDonald House was in Medicine Hat, which I didn't even know we had one. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But bringing it back to the designing of the city, you've got a hospital, you've got individual homes, but here's in the middle of that, here's an actual organization helping children. And isn't that so exciting? All right, so here's a really kind of fun question that has been posed. What have you both individually learned by being part of this Box City project?
That there is absolutely no limit to the imagination that these kids have, and they will surprise you year after year after year. Every single time I think that we've sort of, we've gone through all of the material and, we've discussed everything in community, we'll have a kid that will put their hand up and say, like, what about this? Or we didn't talk about this group of people in our community, or I care about this and I want to talk about this. So it really teaches you there is no limit. And I think as adults, it also helps you carry that and go, you know what, if these grade 3s can dream it and think it and understand the realities of a community, we can too.
Absolutely.
And we can do a lot better than what we do sometimes.
Yeah, that's good. How about you, Shantel?
I love that there's just opportunities for different ways for people to shine. So the students are able to be really creative and show their creative aspects. And we talk to them about how when you're doing the builds, there's no build that's better than another. So City Hall is no better than a single family home. Doing a school is no different than doing a food bank. And we need all of those things. And I think it's a great way for students to be able to also connect somewhat with maybe what their parents do, what is happening in community. And because they might not always have the opportunity to shine through academics or through sports or other curricular activities, I think this is an opportunity for them to showcase their kind of talents and their skills. And I think we've heard that time and time again from the teachers and things, that this is an opportunity for them to see from a student that doesn't get the chance to shine otherwise. And, that they really were able to kind of showcase their skills and what they they learned and have a moment really, and show their loved ones kind of what they can do. And I think it's that pride and that sense of like accomplishment that you see in the students that I just love being a part of. And I think if we can have the opportunity to provide that platform for the students, then I'm there for it every year.
Aw, that is so awesome. If we were to look at something like this as adults, you know, I feel as though so many of us need to think about that, you know, the whole process. Is there an actual curriculum that you guys have written out and there's a way for us to access so that we can be thinking and maybe become better citizens ourselves? That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I should at least try to match what these third graders are doing. I haven't even thought a lot about that. Like, what would be your suggestions to adults in our community to become a little bit more aware?
You know, we've never thought of doing that. We probably very easily could, because we do have PowerPoints, we have things that are written down, but truthfully, I think part of it is it's as simple as what I said in the beginning. You know, those kids go and they take a look around their neighborhood and they take a walk.
That's good.
And they do that and they go and they look at it through a different lens. They go, are there things for everybody? What do our sidewalks look like? Are they wide enough for a wheelchair? Can I get to my local park? Where do I buy food? What's the means of transportation? Can I drive? All of these things. And I think that if adults did the same thing and they took a walk and they looked around, they might start noticing things in their neighborhood and they might go, you know what? This would be really cool here, and maybe it would get those wheels turning a little bit for them as well. I think that's maybe one of the most simple places to start. Just take a look in your own neighborhood, because the other thing that Box City does so well that we're so super proud of is that it connects people. It connects these classes of kids, but it connects these teachers. It allows us to talk to so many other people. And the one thing I think we've really lost, or we've sort of gotten away from, is that connecting with other people.
Okay.
And so I think that's maybe a place to start.
That's very
Another
good.
thing that I would add too is that this year, so we've got some signage around the sign or around the city. So it does give those things that we talk about: walkability, accessibility. So there's some things to think about when you're going in and looking at the Box City build to kind of keep in mind. And we also have the students did QR codes that link to a video about each of them talking about their builds and how it connects to the UN rights of a child and how it connects to communities and connecting together and things like that. So that also might give some ideas around what things to be thinking of. And I always think, you know, kids are great reminders for us because they really do help us to see things differently and to have a bit more empathy and to be thinking of things in a new way. And I think that is the piece. So like, if you're going to look at the Box City and actually see the build, just come in with a different view and try to keep an open mind and learn from the students as well.
That's good. I mean, just that we should pay more attention to what's going on a city level is a great place to begin, isn't it? The QR codes. So there was a video aspect to this too, and that's interesting. So they were creating their building or they're part of the community and then they actually told a story very specific to their own. Okay.
And that's new this year.
That's
actually.
new,
So that's kind of the new element this year. The teachers were really engaged in helping the students to create these videos, and so we have binders at the build so that you can actually take a look through and use your phone to kind of be a little bit more interactive and understanding what the students were thinking when they made the build and what they were connecting to, and I think it kind of brings it a little bit more to life. So
that is awesome. So we want our viewers to remember that this is not going to be a quick run through. Take some time. Go to this, you know, city planning extravaganza and take time and really hear from the kids themselves. I think that's wonderful. So do you have 76, like School Division 76, Prairie Rose? Like, who is doing this project right now?
So the offer is usually sent out and we sort of say, hey, what do you think about this? I have to say we've had a couple of schools. So River Heights and Dr. Kensauer have been our two schools that have jumped on board for the last few years.
Okay.
We like to add schools when we can. The only problem, I guess, with that is that Shantel and I are only two people, so it can get a little bit tricky. But we have reached out to other schools just to give them the offer if they'd like to. With the curriculum changing in the last year, it's been a little trickier just to, I think everyone's just trying to wrap their head around that. If it was up to Shantel and I, we'd probably make this our full-time job and do it all over the place. But for now, Box City. But the one thing, like you said, is if we can encourage other grade 3 classes or other grade 5 classes or anybody to come down to Box City, they can absolutely create a Box City as well for their own school or their own community.
Because you've got the project defined. And okay, before we let you go, we understand that there is a mentorship kind of relationship between the 6th graders and the 3rd graders. How does that look?
So the 6th graders have in their curriculum to learn about elections and the election process.
Okay.
And so they actually come in and they help our grade 3 students to run an election and vote on the city name, because we want to make sure that it's a fair and due process. And so they come in and they kind of explain what ballots are, how to fill them out, and then they fulfill the role of the elected officials and things like that. And so they run the election, and we use the voting booths and the voting boxes and everything, and we make it very official and do an official count. And so it's a great kind of partnership between our grade 6s to be able to come in and do that and teach the grade 3s and support them in their learning, but also to get some hands-on experience with actually running an election as well.
That is so great, because there is, the understanding that there's not a decision on a city level that happens without conversation, without deliberation, and without, some sort of, I just think it's so crazy. I'll probably be reminded that they've really voted down their own water slide because of taxes. That would not have been my expected response, right?
No,
but by teaching them this process, and if the first thing that they start thinking about is, what are we going to name this city? And there's a process to that. Yes. It's a lot bigger scope than one might have realized. So it's exciting, and I understand that this is all at the Esplanade till May 12th.
Yes.
And the hours are posted for the Esplanade, and really want to encourage people to go and check this out. And what a neat, I think the other thing is sometimes we don't always understand that City Hall is working within the community on different projects and stuff. And I just want to say thank you to both of you, because this is just hands and feet in our city, for the city, by the city, for our kids and our families. And I can imagine the pride that those parents and extended family members see when they come and they see this city that was really created by these kids. So continue your great work, and thank you so much. To our viewers today, thank you for being with us. Thank you for just getting excited with us about these community matters. And for Jodi Faith and all of us here at Rogers, we thank you. Have a great day.